Thank you all for joining for today's webinar with the title Gain Full Visibility and Control in Microsoft 365. Who am I? My name is Björn Erkens. I'm the product owner of Runcor Governance, and I will be your host today. My role is that I talk to a lot of end users, organizations, partners on a daily basis, and I try to always learn about challenges that people have when it comes to the topic of M365, and especially, obviously, how can you see relevant data in Microsoft 365? How can you control what end users are doing in your tenant? How can you set up certain policies to manage all of that efficiently? So let's start with looking at something, at a vote or at a research, a mini poll that we did on LinkedIn, asking how people actually stay in control of their Microsoft 365 tenant currently. And you see the answers here. So lockdown as much as possible still is a truth. 40% of people are saying, okay, we are doing this, although we are in Microsoft 365. 8% say Wild West, come on, just do what you like. 34% say train the users and have faith, and 18% have written docs with rules. And I think the two comments on the right-hand side here paint a good picture, and I think they underline what I hear on a daily basis as well. I mean, we are in Microsoft 365. You probably actually move to Microsoft 365 to provide your end users with a new reality, right? You want them to be able to work productively with the different services. So in case you lock down as much as possible, that's my point of view at least as well. Users will hate this platform, right? Because they can't do things that they actually can do. I always get this feedback as well. We open up the system, we enable our end users to work with Microsoft 365, and then we train them, and we want to obviously still know what is happening here. So is lockdown really an option? To be honest, I think it's not a good option. Why? Because of the reasons we just talked about. If you lock down the systems, end users are frustrated with IT. They can't use the services that Microsoft provides them with in the manner that they should, and they will fall to other measures of doing things. So for example, if we are talking about external access or collaboration where people want to share things with, for example, external users, if they can't do so via SharePoint or in Teams and so on, eventually you will force them to move over to shadow IT, right? They will find a way to share information, either if that's via email or via Dropbox or other tools or USB key. I don't know if USB key actually is a scenario in our remote work, but email and Dropbox definitely are. And so the problem with that is with shadow IT, obviously, you then have created this monster by yourself. And because of the lack of insights and control, you don't know what is happening there, right? So at least that's the way I see it, and the way that I always get this feedback. Locking down is not really an option. So what is then the option? Obviously, the option would be, hey, we allow and manage an open Microsoft 365 in which we then enable our users to work efficiently, right? And with that, obviously, you would reduce shadow IT, but the important thing is, when people can do a lot of stuff, you still need to have insights what they are actually doing, and you need to have a way to control or to help them to actually do the right thing, because most of the time end users don't do things in a certain way because they like to harm the organization, right? They are just doing this because they don't know better, right? You in IT know all the way the ins and outs of using Teams and how you should use it in SharePoint and OneDrive and all of that these different things and Power Platform. But there's a very big chance that your end users don't understand this. So they will just do things. So what is the way to stay on control of your data? The challenges is that even though IT is on control, it is very hard to understand information lifecycle. Why? Because insights are scattered into many places. And even though you might find these insights in the different admin centers, they are probably not actionable, right? So what I always hear from digital workplace teams and Microsoft 365 administrators is Microsoft makes our life so damn hard. For every single service I use, whether this is Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, Power Platform, Azure AD, Yammer, whatever it is, I have my different admin center. And now I, as a poor old admin, need to go into these admin centers, and they are data silos. I need to find information about how people are working here in that particular service. And it's not feasible, right? And as well, as I mentioned, if you then find certain things, you would need to correlate this data with maybe some other data which comes out of another admin center. And on top of that, you don't have the possibility to automate kind of processes, right, in a full-fledged way to react to these findings and these insights that you are finding in the admin centers. I mean, we see this also from the Microsoft statistics. Use of services grows at faster pace than IT can manage. All of these teams being created, all of these different things, it's a lot. And yeah, Microsoft, as I mentioned, doesn't make this really easy for admins, right? So this is a list. Let me click this so we can have a good laugh. Skip verification. There we go. This is a list of all the Microsoft portals, the Microsoft administrator sites that Microsoft provides you with. So that might come in handy if you want to explore this in your team, maybe to see where you can get all of these different information in which kind of admin portals here. And you see how on earth should you be able to keep track of all of that. You can't possibly manually go to all of these different admin centers and then make sense all of the information there, right? So yeah, that's hard. So when we pick out the example of maybe external access, we also asked, how do you stay in control of external access to files, sites, and teams in Microsoft 365, right? To just get a picture here of, like, if I have all of these admin centers and I can't manually retrieve that data in a meaningful way, what do I do there? So obvious answer, a lot of people still use PowerShell, right? 41%. 27% still said, okay, we use the out-of-the-box Microsoft 365 reports, meaning admin centers. 13% are already working with third-party tools, and 19% say we don't have a process. Microsoft doesn't make it easy for us, so we don't even look, right? Some nice comments there on the left. I embraced YOLO with my own tenant, so you only live once. Someone else says, okay, the typical combination of PowerShell and third-party tools, or we build custom apps or Power Apps to kind of get information and do something with the information. The thing about PowerShell, right? What we always see, and I have a lot of feedback from people that I talk to from different sized organizations, and what I always hear is admins want to actually move away from PowerShell, right? So the typical approach was maybe in the past, we have all of these admin centers. We now write PowerShell scripts to get us data out of these admin centers. We maybe put this data then into an Excel file or into a SharePoint list Then we look at this data. Maybe we also put this into Power BI to run some reports, create some reports so we can get a better overview. But then that is where it stops, because yeah, what do you do with this data, right? So actually, if you find something what you don't like, I don't know, you maybe find a Teams team that only have one owner, you want to have two. Now you would need to manually write the person, hey, assign a second owner, for example. So that should be automated, right? So it's hard. So what do people tell us? They tell us they want to move away from PowerShell. Why? Because you need to write one PowerShell script per data query. Meaning I had a conversation the other day with a company that told me, hey, we have more than 300 PowerShell scripts. All of these need to be maintained, obviously, and Microsoft really likes to break these scripts with their changes to APIs that they do frequently. Obviously, also internally, someone actually needs to know how to write PowerShell, which, well, you could say that's not an issue. But actually, I think it is, because the younger folks who are becoming administrators now, they sometimes can't even do this, right? And obviously, if people leave the organization that then have written the PowerShell scripts before, then they take their knowledge with them. So PowerShell scripts, in our understanding from what we learn, do not scale. So the question is there a better alternative towards PowerShell? And we can explore that in a second. So in a nutshell, what is it that we hear, or what is it that we learned from the people that we talk to? We think that IT, instead of having multiple admin centers, one for Teams, one for SharePoint, one for OneDrive, Power Platform, Azure AD, Yammer, and so on, they want to have a single location in which they have all of that data in a nutshell, right? So what we think is IT needs actually one admin center with different parts. Inventory, which can help me to discover and gain visibility into what do I have in the tenant. Obviously, reports in which I can configure and say, hey, I want to build reports on this and that topic. I want to get insights, and then policies and automations to say, I want to set certain rules in case I see this and that behavior from end users in the tenant, whether this is external access, lifecycle management, cost management. I want to be able to enforce these policies, these rules also via automation, so that I can resolve the issues detected via these policies. Why do they want to do this? They want to be able to easily view and resolve problems in one central location. And very important, once I have visibility into what is happening in my tenant, I only then can discuss how we want to do things with when it comes to managing Microsoft 365 with my different stakeholders based on data. What do I mean with that? So what became very clear to us is that if I get visibility into what is happening in my tenant, then this opens up certain discussions that I can have internally. So if IT can show that we have external access like this and that, and this and that scenario, then they can sit down and discuss this, what they are seeing with IT security, to come up with a process around how could we manage external access better. If the IT admins see that we always have a lot of disabled user accounts that still have E3 licenses assigned to them, then they can sit down together with the procurement team to define a better process when a user leaves the organization, that there's a process in place that automatically, maybe downsizes the license that this user had, so that no additional costs are created. Or if the IT admin can show that people always create teams but never invite users to it or members to it, then they can give that information to support, who can then reach out and train the Teams owners, right? So it's all about, you need to have this visibility, because without it, you're flying blind and you can't do anything, right? And you want to be able to automate all of that stuff, right? Because doing this manually takes too much time, too much effort, and causes too much costs. How can we help? So we as Runcor, based on all of that stuff that I just reported or that I just showed you guys, that comes from countless calls with our users, customers, partners, potential customers, and so on. We want to give you visibility and control through one admin center. We want you to be able to move away from PowerShell, and we can provide you with easy reports, policies, and automations. How do we do this? Let me show you in a quick demo. All right. So we are now in Runcor Governance, and first of all, I mean, what I touched upon in the presentation was that in Runcor Governance, we want to provide you with as much data from all of the different admin centers, so that you kind of view all of your things in Microsoft 365 through this single pane of glass, right? So what we currently can monitor for you is Microsoft 365 groups, its Teams, Power Automate, Power Apps, SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange, Yammer, and Azure AD. So that's already a very extensive list of different data from different admin centers that we can pull in here. But this will grow over the next weeks and months even more. So always with customer demand, we pull in more and more of admin center data here. Then we are talking about visibility and control, right? So in my point of view, the whole, the heart of Runcor Governance is this checks and automation combination. What are checks? Checks in our language are the governance rules that you can set up to monitor your tenant and then can automatically act on, so that you get rid of violations to these policies. Now I'm in this checks overview page looking at demo data, and I'm seeing apparently these rules have been configured, and I see rule violations towards this specified rules. Where do these checks come from? If I click on add check here, this opens up our checks template library. And this is now where things get interested. All of these different check templates that we have pre-built in here, they come from customer feedback, right? So we don't think that we know everything. We probably don't know a lot, but we are very good at listening to customers, listening to potential users, partners, and so on. So that way we always learn about new use cases. And if we see that there are use cases that make sense to a lot of folks, we pre-build these templates for people. We categorize them into different use case categories. So for example, you want to stay on top of costs, you want to save money, right? You want to get better in managing external access. You want to make sure that whenever a user leaves your organization, you don't miss out on resources they still own or flows that break because this person has built a flow. That flow or this app went viral. Everyone is using this in the company, but it is owned by the user who's not working for the company anymore. The flow doesn't work anymore. Or you want to stay on top of security topics. You want to introduce lifecycle management so that you track inactive teams, for example, so that you can automatically archive them when they become inactive. Let's have a brief look through all of these different rules, and then I think it becomes a little bit clearer what you can do here. So you could set up a rule, for example, saying, hey, I always want to get an alert whenever we find a disabled user account because a person has left the organization, but we forgot to take away his license. Could be that this is only interesting for 1 month, because then the user account will actually be deleted, but for a bigger size company, that still could be a lot of money. Right? Maybe you want to keep track of global administrators, but you can edit this check and say all users without MFA, because you want to say, hey, MFA is important. Whenever someone doesn't have MFA enabled, then we want to enforce this. Maybe you want to keep track of inactive external users because you say, hey, collaboration is important. We need to have externals in our system, but if they become inactive by not signing in for more than X months, totally up to you what you define here, then we want to get a ping and then figure out if we can remove them. Maybe we want to keep track of inactive teams so that we can say, hey, when a Teams team gets inactive because there's no activity, then we want to figure out if we can archive that. Or we want to keep track of teams with inactive external users to automatically send the Teams owner in a certain time frame a list of them, and then they can decide who should still have access and who should be removed, right? And so on and so on. So there are a lot of Teams rules. Moving over to Flow. So what Microsoft really likes to do is changing their licensing model or changing connectors. Hey, we decide as of today, this type of connector is a premium connector. All of a sudden, there are more costs involved for you guys, right? So you maybe want to stay on top of that whenever we find a flow that requires a premium license because it uses a premium connector, or premium action, or premium trigger. You want to stay on top of that again to save costs, or you want to maybe stay on top of flows with errors because if they fail, you want to help the business fix that, or flows without owners, lifecycle management, and so on and so on and so on. For Power Apps, there are 2 templates here currently, but you can build also your own checks. For SharePoint, we have a lot of different things. I will just scroll through this list here, so you can have a look while I scroll. Then Yammer, OneDrive, looking at external user sharing, or OneDrive's near storage limit, which I also hear now more often that storage actually is expensive in OneDrive and SharePoint, so you might want to look for data and visibility into, hey, what drives storage in our SharePoint or OneDrive? How can we react to that so that we don't need to buy additional storage here because that can become costly? And then at the end, Azure AD with some nice things like applications with certificates that are about to expire, or applications with client secrets that are about to expire. All things that Microsoft really don't make easy for me as an admin to get information for. The way you would work with these different templates is that, let's pick this example, teams with less than 2 owners. You would just click a template in case you want to work with a template. And now you land in our check builder. And that's how we want to help you to move away from PowerShell, right? Because this is now a graphical interface which lets you click together these rules, right? So you're in this template. You can obviously change everything here, play with the different properties, the different fields, add more filters, add more related objects. So you can really make these templates your own. Or you can also, if you have your own ideas that we didn't cover so far in the templates, you can create a template from not a template, a rule from scratch. Hey, maybe I want to build a rule on top of flow environments and then with my filter and so on. So you just with this graphical interface define the rules, the policies, the checks you want to enable for your tenant and want to get results for. So that's the first point, right? Second point is now you have all of these checks enabled, and now, for example, we have these teams with very few owners, and now there are 2 ways of dealing with results, right? So now we have found 2 teams that only have 1 owner. The global engineering team has this one, and the local team has this one, right? So here now the question is, what do we do about them here? So how can we take action, right? And there are 2 ways. This, what I'm showing you, is still in beta. So you can manually do things. So in case you want to do an action here, you have different actions that you can enable from here, and that then will do the action in the same moment. So that's more a manual approach, and you can do it in bulk and so on, which probably makes your life easier. For example, if you would find flows without owners and you have 500 of them, you can mark them all here and then delete, for example, right? But you can also put it on autopilot by adding an automation. And that means you can add an automation to a check or policy that you created. And now whenever we find a Teams team with one owner, according to the rule, this would then trigger the automation. And the automation I can now define by clicking on add action. And here I have my different automation actions available, and they are always growing. So more and more of these automation actions are put into that list over the next weeks and months. You have built-in actions, which are these here, that you can already be triggered from Runcor Governance within Runcor Governance, and you have things that you can use to trigger third-party systems, for example. So maybe you want to build your own flow that does something, and you can trigger it via HTTP request, or you maybe use ServiceNow and you want to create a support ticket. In this and that case, also you could do via HTTP request, for example. Let's do a simple example how that looks. So if I want to send an email, in that special case, I just put it in here, and then I could say whenever I have a Teams team with only one owner, then for the Teams owner, I want to send an email to his email address telling him, please assign a second owner to team, and then with the placeholders, I could put in a Teams name and I can tell him what to do. And that is kind of automatically then, whenever we find a Teams team with one owner, that is automatically then being sent to this Teams owner. Now we all know sending one email is nice, but probably won't do the trick, right? So you can build a simple workflow here as well. So you could say, hey, after a delay of 5 work days, if this here didn't do the trick, then the system will check for that. And in case it didn't do the trick and the Teams team only has one owner still, we could add another action here and say, maybe let's get a little bit more aggressive and let's set the manager of this one Teams owner as being the second Teams owner, and then maybe in the same step send both of the guys a friendly email describing what we did and why, because yeah, then they understand. But obviously that's totally up to you. So that's kind of the automation thing. So the checks are the policies that you can set up easily, and then the violations of checks detected can be either manually being dealt with or put on autopilot through the automations. Always what we also do, we are building out an automations template library with different automation use cases that we collect from users, which will grow over time here as well. And then everything is set up for you already. So the same story as with the checks template library. So in case, for example, you say, hey, we always want to make sure that our teams are always in private and not public. Hey, that's the case for me. I just click this template then, and here now everything is populated. If we find public teams, then we will change the team being back to private, and we send an email to the Teams owner to his email address telling them what we did. And here you obviously can change everything, get more steps in, and so on and so on. So just again, a way to make your life easier. All right, visibility. So we are looking at teams with very few owners, right? So what do I do about visibility? So like I want to check out this global engineering team now. If I click this, this opens up our inventory. And in the inventory, the story is I want to discover certain things. So for this object team, global engineering, I see now on one page the properties and the related objects. So again, the story here is I don't want to go to different admin centers to get the whole picture about this object. I want to get this information here, and I want to be able to interact with the data, see the data, maybe dig deeper into that, and so on and so on. I can still do my actions from here also. Yeah, I could export all of the data to Excel and so on and so on. The inventory with the relations and everything, that is pretty interesting for different objects. So for example, for users, I always like to point out this use case here. So for example, if I have a user, right, I have loader, for example, and loader is now maybe still part of your organization, but maybe now he has a disabled user account because he leaves the organization. Under related objects here, I will then see all of these different relations that he has. And again, maybe good scenario, because I recently just talked about this. Maybe Loader was a good power user and he started to write flows or power apps to automate certain business processes, right? Now, maybe some other people from the organization are actually working with these flows, or this flow or this power app has become a solution that is used throughout the whole organization, right? So we maybe want to keep track of, hey, does Loader still owns flows? Because if he is gone, maybe they break. So we should do something about this, right? Or power apps as well. But you could see all different information with regards to the different services here from this relations towards the user, which will probably make your life easier in figuring out things that you need to take care of when Loader actually has left the organization. Finally, dashboards, right? So we talked about checks being the policies that you can enable, automations, taking care of violations that we find during these policies, inventory that lets you discover relations and how data is connected and what people are doing. And finally, you probably want to build reports, right? You want to report on certain things. So what we are doing here is same story as was always. We are trying to pre-build some different reports for you based on use cases. Hey, I want to improve my spending. I want to improve my external access, and so on and so on. So I have different information here. If I click on the template, it opens up a dashboard with certain information here, which we think it could be valuable. But obviously you can create your own dashboards also. And if you create a dashboard, you can also add report tiles to them. If I click on add tile, that opens again another library in which we have pre-built different report templates that you can just put onto a dashboard, whichever dashboard you want to put it on, or on your own that you created from scratch. And you can also create your own report tiles, either in a very simple manner, meaning I can, for example, base a tile or build a tile based on a check or checks that I've created. So maybe I want to do a summary tile on Teams data, or I want to do a list tile on Teams now because I'm in service and I see all the Teams checks here with the violations, and I can click on them. But I can also do this on category. So maybe I want to keep a look at costs and then have a list tile or a summary tile, or maybe I want to do a single tile for different things like inactive teams or whatever. So you get the idea. So you have a lot of flexibility. You can build kind of these different tiles that you want to build for reporting, and then these tiles you can put on the dashboard that you create. There's also a more fancy way of doing this with the advanced tile. While this is here just clicking together things, the advanced tile gives you more flexibility because you still always have this builder logic in here. So maybe I want to build a report based on inventory data licenses, and then I could, with the filter, define my data here for licenses. And then with the visualization, you can define how you want to visualize this data in a different forms here, and so on and so on, and then put that on a dashboard. Finally, dashboards that you create, you can then obviously share with people interested in them by clicking these three dots and say share this dashboard. You can either say I want to share this data out once, or I want to make this a recurring message, maybe on a weekly basis in this time and this time zone, and I want to send it to these folks, and then they get access to that dashboard and can consume these reports exactly, and then get insights into what is happening here. All right, so that was the short introduction of how we are doing things to make your life easier with gaining visibility and yeah, control in Runcor in your Microsoft 365 tenant. I think we have some time left, Chrissy. Let's use the, I think, 10 more minutes for questions. So if you have questions, please put them into the chat, and then Chrissy, we can take them in case we have some, and you let me know and read them out to me. So people, if you have questions, please feel free to put them into the chat, and then we can take them one by one for the remaining, I think, 9 minutes that we have still for this webinar today.
We already have one question.
Okay.
How is the data sent to Runcor? For example, are you using PowerShell modules to query 365 or graph HTTP calls or 365 audit logs forwarding?
Yep.
Is Runcor storing the report data in a database in Azure?
Yeah. Okay. So we have two ways of retrieving this data. The first model would be a software as a service model, meaning you would connect your tenant to Runcor Governance and give us application read permissions for the different services you want us to scan, meaning Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, the Power Platform. We then mainly go through the Graph API to grab that data, and the data then stays in the Microsoft Azure Data Center. And depending on your region, so for the Europeans, we use the Microsoft Azure Data Center, Netherlands, Amsterdam. For the US Americans, we use Central US, Iowa. For the Asia Pacific region, we use Western Australia. And we are planning to set up more and more Microsoft data centers as we go. Important, obviously, for the Europeans, data stays in Europe, doesn't leave Europe. For the US, alike. So that's the first option for the software as a service model. We have another model, which is that you can host it in your own, or you can self-host it in your own Azure subscription, meaning you would then get a package from us, you install it in your own Azure subscription wherever you have that, and then, but then you would obviously need to update on your side and so on. So I would say currently 99% of our customers are using the SaaS version, and a small fraction like banks, insurance, government agencies, like these, sometimes they want to self-host. More questions or follow-up questions on that one?
For now, we have no more open questions.
All right, perfect.
So if someone has a question, now's the time.
Okay, then yeah, let's maybe wait a minute if someone wants to put something into the chat, and then yeah, let's call it a day.
That's good.
All right, but if nothing else comes in, then I say thank you all for joining. Have a great rest of your evening, and then see you around in the next webinars that we host. All right, take care. Bye-bye.